This morning, we're with Queens Congressman Gregory Meeks. We'll hear his take on the impeachment trial, plus his efforts for gun reform, immigration, health care, and affordable housing.
Now from 42nd and 2nd, this is New York's very own Pix 11 News Closeup with Marvin Scott.
Good morning. After an intense 4 days of oral arguments at the impeachment trial of President Trump, the Senate has taken today off. Following the Democrats' presentation, President Trump's legal team began its first of 3 days of rebuttal yesterday. The often contentious proceedings thus far have gone along partisan lines, with the Democrats insisting the president has committed impeachable offenses, while the Republicans argue he has done nothing wrong. With me this morning is a member of the House of Representatives who voted to impeach the president last month. Congressman Gregory Meeks is now in his 11th term representing the 5th Congressional District in Queens. Good to have you back on Close Up.
Good to be with you, Marvin.
So the chief for the Democrats, Adam Schiff, delivered what appeared to be a very compelling argument in favor of impeachment. But did he really deliver that smoking gun, the conclusive evidence to prove the president should be removed from office?
You know what Adam did, and I think masterfully, he did put out a compelling case that I think proves the president's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And for those that might have had a doubt, that said that they would have liked to, he would have liked to have presented more documents that will clearly spell out everything. The only reason why he couldn't was the defendant, the President of the United States, prevented it from having it. And the Republicans are not, if they do not vote, to have documents included in the trial. There's witnesses that we would like to hear from. Bolton.
But they're not going to discuss whether or not they'll allow witnesses until after the oral arguments and after the questions by the senators.
So I'm saying that the case that was laid out by Adam Schiff was an excellent and compelling and I think convincing case.
But not the single piece of evidence like they had in the Nixon impeachment proceedings, where they had the transcript of the tape, the recording of him calling for a cover-up of the Watergate.
Guess what? If Nixon was able to do what this president has been doing, that is block the tapes from being submitted, we would have never heard those tapes. And what this president is doing right now is blocking the documents that surrounds the call and all of the other information that was contained therein from being submitted so that we can view them, so that the public, the American people, the members of Congress can view them. And the Senate has an opportunity now to say, release all the documents.
Do you feel you Democrats have any chance of swaying those Republicans without that evidence? All you need 4 Republican votes to get that 2/3 majority.
Well, I would hope that the Republican senators would realize that they just took an oath of office to conduct a fair trial. How do you do a trial, Marvin, if you don't listen to witnesses and documents that are surrounding the circumstances of what took place?
Now, the Republicans, the Democrats, are dealing with the Republicans here who say, well, you had an opportunity to call some of these witnesses during the impeachment inquiry, and you didn't. Like John Bolton. I know the president, he blocked a number of people from appearing before and testifying at the inquiry.
Look, what the president wanted to do is prevent individuals from testifying. Mr. Bolton said that he would testify if subpoenaed. We know that if we had subpoenaed him, that then the president would have put in executive privilege, etc., and we would have had to go to court, and then it would have been, this whole process would have been dragged out for another 6, 7, 8, 9 months, probably long past the election. We think that it's important, though, also that we had presented enough facts, because basically what we acted was in the confines of being a grand jury. You don't have to present your whole case to the grand jury. And then it's up to the triers of fact, in this case, the Senate, to make sure that they bring out and introduce all of the evidence and all of the witnesses that are possible in a case. And the House managers would love to introduce those pieces of evidence if given the opportunity.
And that won't happen until the end of probably next week. I want to take a break for a moment because I want to, first of all, I have to tell the audience here, we're taping this program Friday morning without the benefit of hearing the Democrats' last day of arguments and the Republicans' first day, Saturday. Now, if you haven't been glued to the wall-to-wall coverage of this historic impeachment trial, Henry Rossoff, right now, he provides us with an overview of the Democrats' first 2 days of laying out their case against President Trump.
The Senate will convene as a court of impeachment.
Right as the impeachment trial of President Trump got underway, we got our first surprise. Republican leader Mitch McConnell seemed committed to a speedy trial, but was forced to slow down. The trial calendar will now look like this, with 3 days, not 2 as initially thought, for each side to make opening arguments before the Senate asks questions. But McConnell still does not want the Senate to take up the question of witnesses and documents until after arguments.
The House chose not to pursue the same witnesses. They apparently would now like the Senate to pre-commit to pursuing ourselves.
But Democrats argue the president has made that impossible by blocking witnesses and documents, and the Senate has the right to gather new evidence.
The Senate can remedy President Trump's unprecedented cover-up.
While debating an amendment to get that new evidence, it almost seemed like impeachment manager Adam Schiff was daring the Senate to ignore the facts.
The question is, do you want to hear it? Do you want to hear it? Do you want to hear from someone who was in the meetings, someone who described what the president did?
The president's defense team painted the whole investigation as nothing more than a continued smear campaign.
Since the president was sworn into office, there was a desire to see him removed.
On the Senate floor, Democratic House managers began laying out the case as to why they believe President Trump committed high crimes and misdemeanors. But off of the Senate floor, all the talk was still about all of the witnesses and evidence that are not part of this trial.
The president was the key player in the scheme. Everyone was in the loop. He directed the actions of his team. He personally asked a foreign government to investigate his opponent. These facts are not in dispute.
Lead impeachment manager Adam Schiff began the day by outlining the case against President Trump and explaining that President Trump pressured Ukraine to investigate political opponent Joe Biden and his son Hunter, and then obstructed the investigation into the Ukraine matter and said what he did would be the founding fathers' worst nightmare. Impeachment managers did this by first explaining how the president pushed Ukraine Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch out of the way and sent in Rudy Giuliani to get the investigations the president wanted. Managers also implored the senators to reconsider what they spent yesterday rejecting, getting more documents and hearing from more witnesses currently being blocked by the White House.
You will see them, and so will the American people, if you allow it. If, in the name of a fair trial, you will demand it.
Meanwhile, just before opening arguments began at an economic forum in Davos, Switzerland, the president seemed to acknowledge he's still in control of much of the potential trial evidence Democrats are seeking.
I thought our team did a very good job, but honestly, we have all the material. They don't have the material.
The president's Republican allies also say the Democrats can't have it both ways, claiming to already have a strong case against the president, but demanding they still need more witnesses and evidence.
In their rebuttal, the president's legal team is arguing the Democrats simply have no case against Trump.
We believe that once you hear those initial presentations, the only conclusion will be that the president has done absolutely nothing wrong, and that these articles of impeachment do not begin to approach the standard required by the Constitution, and in fact, they themselves will establish nothing beyond those articles. You look at those articles alone and you will determine that there is absolutely no case.
Now back here with Congressman Gregory Meeks, and we're talking without the benefit of hearing the rebuttal of the president's counsel, which we're taping this on Friday morning. But we heard in that report, when we heard the president say this is nothing but a hoax, it's a smear campaign. But isn't it true that the Democrats from day one have talked about impeachment? I have here, who was it, Congressman Jamie Raskin, a day before the president was inaugurated, he said, I may well vote to impeach. In December of 2017, Congressman Al Green of Texas, he forced a vote on articles of impeachment. This has been the mantra of the Democrats from day one, hasn't it?
Because if you look at the results of those votes, overwhelmingly, Democrats voted not to impeach. There was nothing to impeach about. I voted not to impeach. I voted against those actions. And, we heard them talking about a smear campaign. Smear campaign wasn't started by Democrats on this president. Smear campaign was started by the Republicans. Listen to the words of Lindsey Graham during the campaign when he called him the worst thing the Republican Party has ever seen. He called him a racist and a bigot, and said he was would be a disaster to the Republican Party. Listen to the words of Mitt Romney. Listen to the words of Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio. This is during the campaign. This wasn't Democrats that did a smear campaign. It was the same Republicans, many of whom are in the Senate right now, that said those things about the sitting president of the United States. So it wasn't Democrats if there was a smear campaign. It was Republicans that started the smear campaign themselves. Just listen to their words.
The bottom line. Who's going to win this case? Hold on that answer. We're going to take a break with Congressman Meeks. Stay with us as Pix 11 News Close-Up continues.
You're watching New York's very own Pix 11 News Close-Up with Marvin Scott.
Back now with Congressman Gregory Meeks, and of course, the subject is the impeachment trial of President Trump. How do you respond to those pundits who say all of this, he's going to wind up being acquitted, he's going to wind up getting reelected, the Democrats are going to lose seats? Your response to that?
No. I think that the American people, if you look, close to 70% of the American people said they want all the facts. They want to know, and they don't understand why the president is covering up what took place, and that the Senate, if they don't allow witnesses as well as documents, are participating in the cover-up. I think that's going to have a huge effect on the American people going into this election. There's no reason to cover up. If the president didn't do anything, and if the Senate believes that there was nothing done, then they should let all the evidence in. In fact, they should be volunteering to submit all of the evidence, and I think that's going to have a huge effect. But I also think that the American people know that Democrats have already, whether you're talking about gun control, whether you're talking about lowering the cost of prescription drugs, whether you're talking about protecting our LGBTQ community, whether you're talking about bills that would help our veterans, that we've passed all of these bills already in the House. And it's been the Senate that has been the graveyard. It's been the McConnell graveyard that has blocked these progressive bills from getting passed, and or the president refusing. DACA and the DREAM Act, we've passed that for immigration reform.
There have been some positives out there, right? But there are also, I have to say this, playing devil's advocate, there have been positives on the side of the president. We haven't had an economy as good as this in years. The joblessness rate is the lowest in some 40 years. We also have a trade agreement with China. So there are some positive things that have come out, and we seem to lose it in the daily coverage of all of this.
Well, clearly the president wants to take credit for those things, and we all want a positive economy. I think the president should, instead of, as he often does, trying to criticize President Barack Obama, is to say thank you. Because clearly in the 8 years that Obama has been president, or even in the first 4, Obama, created more jobs than this president has done. So the president inherited an economy that was put in the right direction by President Obama, who took the job when we were in the worst and the greatest recession since the Great Depression. So the issue really is going to unfold as to what this president has done to the economy over the next 4 years, over the 4 years afterwards. And I think that if you look at what's happening with our farmers and others, in manufacturing, in a number of areas where he made promises that he was going to improve, those indicators show just the opposite.
All right, so going ahead, next week, this could all be over. Without the witnesses, do you feel he'll be acquitted?
Well, I think that it surely appears as though the Senate wants to be a component of the cover-up. It's clearly a cover-up that's going on in Washington, D.C. right now. But the key, Marvin, is the camera of history is rolling. The truth is going to come out sooner rather than later. And those that try to cover up the truth, they are going to be the ones that history is going to record in a negative way. So I would urge my Senate colleagues, my Republican Senate colleagues, to really think about the fact that the camera of history is rolling and they will be recorded as being a part of the president's cover-up if they at least don't want to go forward with the evidence of.
And we'll be watching this as the rest of this unfolds all throughout the week. Let's move on to other areas. As a senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, how is all of this playing out with our allies?
It's troublesome with our allies. We're losing our respect and leadership role. You know, Marvin, we've seen pictures where we've seen other world leaders laughing at this president, quite frankly, making fun of him behind his back. I have opportunities when, you know, as you've noted, I'm a part of the Foreign Affairs Committee. I've traveled, I've met with some of my legislative colleagues, and they all bring me to the side and saying, what's going on in America? You know, we don't understand this. So it seems as though we've got a president that seems to side more with individuals who are dictators than those who believe in the free and fair democracy that we used to be the strong leaders on. So it is affecting our leadership around the world.
Let's talk about his policy with Iran and the attack on the military leader Qasem Soleimani.
Well, look, to me, that was in fact an assassination of a bad guy. There's no question about that. No one will say that Soleimani was a good guy. But it is, what was the long-term focus? What's the plan? What's the end result? What do you look, you know, did it make us safer as a country? Well, the answer is absolutely not. As a result, we've had to send more troops over there. As a result, our allies are more concerned and they've got to protect themselves more. As a result, you have Iran now talking about they may pull out of completely all of the deal that they made with reference to going the nuclear agreement. So the context, you know, when you look at the long term, is there any long-term gain? The answer is no. I mean, there was a short term, we got rid of a bad guy. But long term, there's pain there. And it does not make us any safer. In fact, I'd argue that we're in there's more threats and greater danger.
But no fear of going to any war, as some people are concerned about.
Well, I'm concerned about it also. I hope not. You know, the fact that both sides seem to de-escalate after the attacks went back, that was a positive. But who knows what happens? What does this president do if there's some other kind of retaliation? Because the president's actions in the first place were erratic. And what he does is not strategic. It's always spontaneous and erratic and sometimes irrational with no real forethought on what and why you're doing what he does.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about a couple of local issues. I know you're doing something to help the medallion cab drivers and a lot of other local issues to talk about as Pix 11 News Close-Up continues. Stay with us.
You're watching New York's very own Pix 11 News Close-Up with Marvin Scott.
Back now with Congressman Gregory Meeks. Let's call this the lightning round. I have a number of questions in limited time, and we're talking about this impeachment. All these proceedings have distracted from the work of Congress, and I know there's a lot before there. You have a full plate, particularly on gun reform. You've been very outspoken in the halls of Congress on that. Where do you stand on the gun reform?
Well, gun reform we've already passed in Congress to close the gun show loophole. To make sure that we increase the time that the FBI have to do background checks. These are common sense proposals that passed the Congress, passed the House, waiting for the Senate to move on.
But they're still involved in this trial. And where do we stand? I know there was talking about health care reform.
On health care reform, what we've done, and we've passed already again in the House, particularly to try to make sure that we make prescription drugs more affordable. So that, for example, Medicare can negotiate with the drug companies to bring the costs down and to have a cap on how much people have to can spend for for prescription drugs.
Passed the House, but still waiting for
Still
action.
waiting on. It's in the McConnell graveyard right now.
And what about the infrastructure? I know the president made a big deal about providing funds for the infrastructure, crumbling infrastructure all across the country.
And we're still working on that bill. The House Transportation Committee is working, and there'll be a proposal that we've got coming out of the House. Again, that we've tried to negotiate with the White House and the Senate to come up with how you pay for it. They have come up with nothing. We've got various proposals. We hope to get that done.
On immigration, now you're one of the sponsors of the Dream and Promise Act for Dreamers, and that has already passed the House, but still waiting.
Again, in the McConnell graveyard so far.
But you're not going to get something like that signed by the president.
Well, and that's going to play a role because we're going to make sure that we articulate what we're doing and the bills that we've passed in the House and how significant and it's important for the American people. We're going to keep pushing because it's the right thing to do.
Okay, let's go back to a couple of local issues here in New York. I mean, affordable housing. I've been listening to it all these years from politicians say, yeah, we need more affordable housing. I think Mayor Koch is the only one who provided something like almost 300,000 houses for the affordable housing. Where do we stand on that? What are you doing from your position in Congress?
Well, we're pushing, number one, to make sure that there should be additional investments on the part of HUD, additional money from the federal government in that. I've been very focused on trying to make sure that we fix and revitalize public housing. I'm a product of public housing. I grew up in New York City's housing authority, and we've got to make sure that people have a better quality of life.
What can you do to help those folks in the deplorable conditions in NYCHA?
Well, what we're doing, and an example of what we've done in the Rockaways, for example, I partner along with Councilman Donovan Richards to have what is a RAD program, was a public-private partnership where NYCHA is still there to make sure that the rights of those that live there, but we were able to revitalize those facilities in a fashion that they are living and have improved quality of life living.
Medallion cab drivers, they've lost 80% of the value of those medallions. You came out this past week with a program to help them.
Yes. What happened there is, as you have certain banks doing the right thing, like Signature Bank, forgiving them on their loan, of course, that's still seen by the IRS as income, and they would have to pay taxes on hundreds of thousands of dollars of which they can't afford. We're saying that debt relief should be exempt from their gross income, and they should not have to pay taxes on that amount of money.
You familiar with the remarks of Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams this week regarding gentrification and a lot of denunciation of his remarks? How do you respond to it?
Well, I think that what the borough president was trying to say is that in neighborhoods like in Brooklyn, and I can also say like in Queens, there are some individuals that recently moved into our boroughs and, trying to tell the people that have lived there for a long period of time what should or should not happen in their borough. Of course, democracy is everyone has a voice. And we need to figure out how we work together. But I think that was the intent of the borough president, and he apologized for the remarks as he made them.
Now, you are the chairman. You've been elected chairman of the Queens Democratic Committee, and you have a race coming up for the borough president because Melinda Katz has now become the district attorney out there. Who are you supporting for that?
Yeah, we've got a bright young man who's been a member of the city council. His name is Donovan Richards, and we are behind him 1,000%. We think he'll make a great borough president.
Okay, the question I got to ask you, presidential race coming up. Have you supported anyone, endorsed anyone yet?
I've not come up with made an announcement on an endorsement yet. We will do that shortly.
Do you feel the Democrats have a winning candidate out there?
Any one of the Democratic candidates are better than the current president of the United States.
How do you feel about Mayor Bloomberg getting in that race?
Any one of them. Bloomberg.
Anyone in particular?
One of them.
Can't give you
I'm not. Maybe when I decide who I'm going to go with, I'll let you know. But any one of the Democratic candidates right now is a huge improvement on the current occupancy of the guy in public housing on Pennsylvania Avenue. That's public housing. We need to evict him and put one of these others in there.
Okay, let's advance it. After we get through the presidential race, we have the mayoral race. Anyone in your sights there for?
No, we've got a number of good candidates also. As you've indicated, I'm chair of the Queens County Democratic Organization. I'm going to sit down with the people of Queens County and of that organization, and we'll come up with a decision.
Boy, we covered a lot of ground.
In such a short period of time.
Thank you. Congressman Gregory Meeks, always a pleasure to have you on the program.
It's good to be with you.
And Want to make sure that you all stay with Pix 11 for coverage of the impeachment trial? You can watch it on our website, the Pix 11 app, and our Facebook page. We're also carrying it live on our new streaming channel, Pix 11 Plus. You can find Pix 11 Plus on your favorite streaming device, including Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Android TV. And that'll do it for our program this week. If you have any comments or wish to see this broadcast again, log on to our website at pix11.com/News Closeup. Up next, Greta Van Susteren and Full Court Press. I'm Marvin Scott. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.